Excellent. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our session on advanced air mobility. I have the privilege of speaking alongside Melissa Tomkiel, President of Blade Air Mobility, who will be joining me on stage momentarily. But we wanted to give the stage to bringing awareness to what is the future of aviation for us here in North America and around the world. And for us, we really focus at CAM, the Canadian Advanced Air Mobility Consortium, on bringing awareness, insight to the future of aviation from where we are today en route to a net zero operating future. This is going to give us the opportunity not only for redefining how we move people, goods, and services across the world, but how we incorporate that in a diverse, equitable, and inclusive way. We know, though, for advanced air mobility, this is not a technology problem that we are trying to solve. This is a commercialization, and this is an organization problem. We created the Canadian Advanced Air Mobility Consortium as a federal not-for-profit in Canada, showcasing how we can bring together our three levels of government, federal, provincial, and municipal, as well as our airlines, operators, and capital community en route to bringing the future of aviation to Canada. We're privileged to operate across our Indigenous lands in North America, specifically the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. And here in the Miami area, we are honored to be on the sacred lands of the Tequesta, Taino, and Seminole First Nations, knowing that the future of aviation must be equitable, inclusive, and diverse for our needs of moving people, goods, and services. So today's session, we are diving into a fireside chat of making flight accessible, the advanced air mobility context. And we wanted to bring awareness to the importance of partnerships globally that have helped us on the Canadian side, that we are expanding here in the beautiful city of Miami, across the United States, and on the global aspect as well. We're privileged to be co-founded with the NASA equivalent in Canada, the National Research Council, who in conjunction with the United Nations has designated our entity as the United Nations ICAO 2050 goal towards net zero aviation emissions for the country. We continue to work together, showcasing how advanced air mobility is going to bring our future vision and operations across the country. For us, we are working towards bringing the organization and nimbleness of the Canadian market to bring this new industry to life. Our goal fundamentally at CAM is designing a unified national strategy for zero-emission advanced air mobility. This is what drives us day in and day out. There's been momentum created across the industry, which we'll be speaking about with Melissa and the Blade Air Mobility team as well, showcasing not only the vertical takeoff and landing capacity, but those of our partners in both pilot training, existing vertical helicopter operations, as well as expansion into the fixed-wing market of how we are transitioning to the future of aviation. This not only takes all of the work coming out of the drone and remotely piloted aircraft systems world, but expands into the new opportunities seen in Southern Florida with our regional air mobility partners, our urban air mobility partners, and of course, the golden nugget that we're trying to obtain in that intercontinental commercial aviation side. Some of these aircraft, as you know, are looking at the vertical takeoff and landing capacity on a fully electric-powered aircraft. Seen here is one of our partners of Joby's S4 aircraft on that transition and easier access to the 3D space above our cities. More nearer term to market is the retrofitting of existing aircraft. Here is one of our local operators in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, of Harbour Air on their float plane, showcasing a retrofitted, now fully electric-powered aircraft operating within the Vancouver, British Columbia space. These retrofits of existing certified aircraft move our time frames forward to operations much more so than some of the requirements needed on brand new builds. And lastly, as we look to the additional electric and hydrogen fuel cell opportunities, the future of pulling in different net zero energy sources are where we lean into the partnerships on both the operator side as well as the airline side and the end users, knowing that it has to be a pathway towards net zero in order for the industry to succeed. Now for us on the Canadian side, our focus is not just on the research and development. We are moving towards the time frame to revenue-generating commercial operations. We have that already today with our drone and RPAS space. We are excited to continue to progress that with our partners across the country in our regional air mobility and fixed wing space, and to continue to lean in with great partners like Melissa's team at Blade Air Mobility on the urban side en route to the larger intercontinental piece. This tangibility is starting now. This is going to be the start to the future of larger aircraft, both piloted and remotely piloted, in helping our societies for the transition of the future of aviation. What we are building in Canada is to be shared and interconnected across the world. We focus not only on building our national strategy from the federal, provincial, and municipal levels, tying that in with revenue-generating projects today, and building a workforce for the future that is both diverse, equitable, and inclusive, and organizing our capital to enact that as soon as possible. So with that, we're going to build into some of the existing operations expanding into the Canadian space, and I'd like to welcome Melissa Tomkiel, the president of Blade Air Mobility, to join me on stage to showcase some of the context in advanced air mobility as well.
Hello. Thanks for having me here.
Excellent. So please, Melissa, give us an introduction, and then I know we have an incredible video that we'd like to show the audience as well.
Absolutely. So at Blade, since 2014, we've been creating the ecosystem that's required to make urban air mobility and advanced air mobility with autonomous aircraft a reality. And we've been doing that by aggregating hundreds of thousands of flyers around the globe, both US, Canada, India, and today we actually announced the formation of Blade Europe. We're looking to expand our operations there imminently by creating a network of captive infrastructure, which is required for all the logistics that go into coordinating ground transportation to air transportation, as well as to safely and in an organized fashion put 6 to 8 individuals who are strangers onto the same aircraft, making sure all the baggage is organized properly and that everyone gets to where they're going in a proper manner. We overlay that with our flyer to flight deck proprietary technology, which is at the moment our sole source of distribution, but it's a tool that we know that our hundreds of thousands of users really favor. And then with that, we overlay our brand, which has now become trusted around the world. It invokes safety and reliability and trust with our customers.
That's it. And with that, let's take a look at the incredible brand of Blade. So please, can we cue the video?
One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
For those of you who dreamed of a future full of flight and limitless possibility, your time has come.
Flight time today is 5 minutes.
Blade, fly the future today.
And there we go. Some of the technology playing out today here in the United States as well. Melissa, give us further insight. This platform, the technology play, tell us how that's allowing all these partnerships to form on the Blade side as well.
Absolutely. So, we leverage our asset-light business model, right? We don't own or operate aircraft. And we leverage it so that once the electric technology becomes certified, and we know that that's forging ahead on a path, hopefully with a timeline at the end of 2024, it's going to be a seamless transition, just an equipment swap for us. So the current generation rotorcraft and amphibious seaplanes and eventually jet aircraft that we're using today is going to transition to that electric aircraft. And we are perfectly situated to do that because we're not laden by any ownership of aircraft. And just like today, we know for our various customers, right, for our passenger customers, for example, we couldn't service them in all of the business lines that we have and all the geographies where we fly with just one type of aircraft, right? And that's why we have multiple alliances with OEMs of EVA. Each mission, each geography is going to have different operating specification requirements, right? Sometimes it might make sense to have an aircraft that can only take 1 or 2 passengers. Other times you want 5 to 8. A lot of times you need instrument flight rule capable aircraft. Other times its visual is better, or easier, cheaper, right? So it all depends. So today we have a portfolio of different technology, just like we will when EVA gets certified. We hope to have a wide variety of Beta, Eve, eventually Whisk, whatever the manufacturer is, because otherwise we can't service our customer.
And let's build upon that. Speaking of the instrument flight rules, which some of the complex weather systems that we have on the Canadian side, the most recent partnership with Helijet, one of the world's largest scheduled helicopter service providers on the planet. What does this mean for opportunities in showcasing an existing demand route and that transition plan to our net zero future?
Yeah. Well, I can't speak more highly of Helijet and the operations that they have and they've had for the past 30 years. And there are many, many advantages of being an asset-light company. One of our weaknesses is that we're only as strong as our operating partners, right? Because we are relying on them at the end of the day for the quality of the product when it comes to flight operations. And with the team at Helijet, we have nothing to worry about there. They are one of the most reliable and one of the only legacy helicopter airlines on the planet. They have built out, specifically to your question about IFR, they have built out the infrastructure that's required to run a reliable service on commuter routes. They have their own certified IFR approaches at the urban heliports that they've built and that they manage, which is a huge advantage over some of the floatplane operations there, which are VFR only. So people still have to go to work. If you work for the government and you need to go to Victoria, you still have to go if it's foggy, right? And Blade and Helijet can do that. I think what we're most excited about with our partnership with Helijet is not only using the resources that we have at Blade in the sense of our technology and our brand and our global reach to kind of supercharge what they have now, but also the expansion opportunities, because they have great routes between Victoria, Vancouver, Nanaimo, but it certainly doesn't end there. And so we are eyeing expansion there in the Pacific Northwest, both domestic in Canada and international, providing connectivity between Vancouver and places like Seattle.
Well, I think that builds upon these city pairs that we have the opportunity, both at Vancouver, Seattle, Toronto, New York, Boston, and Montreal. This is a similar narrative that we can continue to build upon, that examples like the Pacific Northwest lay out for the rest of the continent. Now, we also, in knowing this advanced air mobility language, we speak about the zero-emission aviation, but there is an immense amount of challenges that we still have ahead of us. This noise concern. How are we starting to apply this, knowing the existing narrative of conventional helicopters, conventional aircraft are at the front and center of the public's mind? How do we start breaking that down?
Well, honestly, I think it comes down to educating the public that this emerging technology is real. This is not the Jetsons. This is not 30 years from now. Beta's flying ALIA. I think they've logged now over 300 hours. They fly it every single day between Plattsburgh and Burlington. The CEO himself is flying this aircraft. The Air Force was just flying in it last week. This technology is real, and they are very helpful in demonstrating that to the public because they'll fly one of their current generation aircraft, an A-Star, ahead of ALIA. So they'll fly that, then they'll fly ALIA, and then the difference in the noise footprint is really evident. And in terms of what I've experienced from our business operations, the biggest issue we have with most community acceptance does come from noise, and fortunately this technology is solving that. We just have to make sure people understand that it's real. And as an industry, and I always speak about this with our OEM partners and others in the space, it's incumbent upon us to do so because there are real threats to infrastructure. And if you don't have the infrastructure, you're not going to fly. So, all of this technology with quiet, zero emission, eventually, autonomous aircraft is going to have nowhere to land if the infrastructure starts closing now.
And this is the critical part coming up in our next panel as well, is speaking about advanced air mobility in our urban geographies. How do we look at the fabric of our communities as an opportunity to bring and invite aviation in rather than where it's been consistently segregated to the outside, not a part of that fabric development? So the infrastructure piece continues to play an immense role. Where does Blade see the future both on the vertical takeoff side, the fixed wing side, playing into this infrastructure side?
Well, one of the key elements, people always ask me, what do we look for when we look to grow our business or expand our business, right? And for us, it's where there's existing operations and infrastructure. There's congestion on the ground, so it creates friction and it creates a willingness to pay for the value proposition of flight. But also there has to be an element of community acceptance, right? And that's why cities like Vancouver and cities like Miami are a pleasure to work with, because there's not only acceptance for this new technology, the local governments are embracing it. And that matters for so many things. It matters for the practicality of flight by allowing for more kind of nodes in terms of landing possibilities. It allows for what we're talking about here, about the accessibility of it from a price perspective, because we can talk about the cost of flying electric aircraft, but essentially, fundamentally, it's not necessarily that much cheaper than current generation aircraft, mostly because of the infrastructure fees that you have to pay when you land. But when municipalities start embracing that technology and provide subsidies and grants and waivers for using the green electric technology, now you can really cut that price down. And we've already managed in New York to be competitive with Uber Black cars to the airport. Our retail rate for a 6-minute helicopter flight between West 30th Street, Manhattan, and JFK Airport is $195, and that can get as low as $95 with our commuter passes. So we're already pretty close, but the goal is to keep getting that down, and that only happens when you have the support from the local governments.
That's exactly it, and that's where our conversations this morning really led into not only the local governments, the public transportation providers, and showcasing how we can integrate this new technology and the 3D space above our cities better into that community fabric for the connectivity piece. So let's build upon this Europe announcement. We'll bring it back to North America in a moment, but exciting new developments for Blade. How is this going to play out in the world development for operation as this asset-light model as well?
Right. Well, that's a great question. One of the benefits of our asset-light model, just like we did with Helijet, is where we see opportunities where there's existing markets, that's existing friction, existing community support by both the regulators and local municipalities, and there's a willingness of people to pay for the value proposition. And that doesn't exist everywhere, right? You can't just draw a bunch of lines on a map between cities and expect there to be a market there. it exists in right now with the current technology in only a few places in the world. But Europe is one of those places. It ticks all the boxes in terms of the demographics and the existing operator network and the existing infrastructure. And given just a lot of the nature of the terrain there, there's a lot of mountains, there's a lot of rivers, the need to fly is essential. So we're really excited about that. And I think that our plan to expand there is actually one that we've deployed in the United States and we will deploy in Canada. Something that your video touched on, which is incredibly important, not only just for serving humanity, but also in terms of community acceptance, which is the transportation of organs. So Blade is now the largest provider of transport for human organs in all of North America. We went public in May of 2021. It's been about a year. And the first acquisition that we did, since we raised about $360 million in that transaction, and the first acquisition that we closed right before Helijet was the acquisition of Trinity Medical Solutions, which made us the largest provider of those services. And it changes people's annoyance factor when they hear a helicopter landing, knowing it's carrying a heart and it's saving a life. What's unique to Blade is that we are able to combine the utilization of the aircraft for the organ missions with passenger utilization. So that allows us to drive our costs down, right? So the same aircraft that's flying passenger missions during the day is transporting organs at night, the different crew. That provides maximum flight hours per aircraft, which people who know how the economics work on aircraft means that you get a lower net flight hour cost.
That's it. Yeah.
And that's a model that we've been using to expand our operations, and I'm hoping that in Europe we see the opportunity there in what we call metamobility.
Metamobility,
yeah,
there you
as
go.
well.
Excellent. Now, as we kind of wrap up, Melissa, give us some insight of what the next near-term hurdles you see from Blade's operations going forward.
So we specifically designed our business to be profitable on a unit economic basis using current generation aircraft, right? So we will continue to operate. We can control, our below the line spending, depending on certain things we want to do, how much we want to spend on marketing. Our goal is obviously to accelerate the transition to electric aircraft. The biggest hurdle that I think we face in getting there probably comes from the regulatory side of things, which again, the more the OEMs work with FAA, DOT, and the equivalents in other countries, hopefully the closer that we get there. I will say that I've been incredibly impressed by, at least in Canada as well, with the regulatory authorities' interest in this new technology. I mean, specifically NASA and FAA have just really been embracing it, and a lot of local communities like Miami as well have been too. So the biggest hurdle long term is going to be the certification of electric aircraft. Short term, it's fighting the battle with communities that are threatening the existing infrastructure, right? Because we know that these aircraft are going to be operating under the same framework that our flights do today, right? They're going to abide by all the federal aviation regulations that we fly under now. And CAA regulations that we fly in Canada. And if that infrastructure is jeopardized, then it's going to cause a real wrinkle on the ability to deploy it in an efficient manner.
And those timeframes that we're all trying to meet in the industry on having the regulatory support, getting that certification, and then critically, as we know, the funding required behind there as well. And this is one of the big pieces that we tried to focus on the Canadian side is now that we have a national voice for advanced air mobility, bringing the different ecosystem together, what is our next hurdle coming down the line? And regulation and certification continues to be a challenge as we hit those time frames, but now we're looking at the capital piece. What does it mean once we have the VC money that has entered the market now transition to a more commercialization side? And this is where we're really privileged on the Canadian side to have the Canadian Infrastructure Bank partner with us on looking at Canada's first net zero aviation fund to continue to champion and support these opportunities coming across the country. So this is the continued hurdles as we move down the chain, solving them out and pushing it forward from the community acceptance, the noise side as well, and of course leading into that capital aspect.
Yeah, I mean, on that note, we've been really fortunate in the United States. We actually call it Operation Warp Speed to get to certification on the EVA, because the capital markets has invested over $8 billion in this space in the last year. So we were the first urban air mobility company to go public last year. Since us, I mean, there have been 5 or so OEMs, right, that have gone public the same way, that the same process that we did. And we collectively raised a lot of money. And that, which is, as we all know, from an R&D perspective, that is essential to get any sort of aircraft flying, legally with passengers. So we're very happy to see the enthusiasm in the capital markets that we've seen here in the U.S. And we hope we see that elsewhere in the world. India is a place where it's strongly leaning into it, backed by the government. The government in India just announced an initiative to offer essentially zero interest financing for the acquisition of new aircraft, specifically aircraft that can service these urban air mobility routes, so current generation rotorcraft. And that's great for us, especially as we start making purchase orders through our operator network on the EVA.
Excellent. And just as we wrap up on that note, Melissa, talking about the India side, but bringing it back here to Miami, any tidbits of excitement that we could see for Blade here in the Miami area in the near future?
Look, we love Miami. We've been flying here for 7 years on a variety of different products. We have our Blade One jet product by the sea between New York and Miami, and we have our early stage kind of urban air mobility V0 with our seaplanes that operate in and out of Watson Island. We hope to see a lot more rotorcraft activity here, because we learned so much about how this network is going to look in the future by doing it today. What the traffic patterns are, what's required on the ground to provide safe and seamless connectivity between all the different modes of transportation, where the demand is, do changes and tweaks need to be made to ATC, those sort of things. So we really look, to expand our footprint here.
That's it. Well, heard here from Melissa as well on the Miami side. We want to make sure we pass on the thanks for the continued conversation here in Miami, and the open invitation to continue for Motivate Vancouver, which will be the sister event of CoMotion coming up in June of this year up in Vancouver, British Columbia. So Melissa, thank you so much again for the time, and we look forward to continuing the conversation in Canada.